Hello and welcome back, fellow Singaporeans, Malaysians, and friends from around the world, to another edition of Weekly Musings with Jae Yong in Singapore. And today we have a special guest, and he's a good friend of mine, and I think we've met since 2011. And I guess,
Yep.
yeah, his name is Ross Stephenson, and he's an extremely multi-talented educator and entertainer. And if you'd like to know more about him, you can go check him out on LinkedIn or even on his Instagram, Ross Stephenson. And yeah, I'm so glad to have Ross in this episode, as I think we've come a long way as friends, and I would say colleagues as well at some point of time in our lives.
Yeah.
So welcome, Ross. How's things in
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. Things are pretty good. I would just say the only thing about Malaysia is that the weather has been really, really hot. That's the one big thing. Everybody's suffering under the heat, but otherwise, I'm doing well, and I'm absolutely honored that you've invited me for your podcast.
Well, it's not so much different here in Singapore because we are just a bridge away.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess we were friends since 2011. I guess
January 2011. That's when we first
January
started our
2011.
psychology. Yeah, exactly.
Wow, and I think along the way you've picked up like masters, and like you've also went into crypto. Obviously we won't go
Yep.
into that today. And wow, so such an amazing journey so far.
Yeah, so much has changed in just, a short decade. It's incredible to think about.
Yeah, and I think we just like to talk about some things that has been in top of our minds, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to talk about the rise of AI and how it's been
Yeah.
affecting our lives, and what can we learn from there, right?
Mm.
So for me, I think I could kick the ball rolling first. Like ever since I found out about ChatGPT, which is like uh, for those who still don't know what ChatGPT is, GPT is Generative Performance Transformer, something like that, or Generative Program Transformer. So what it does is basically it's an AI that helps that looks into a large set of data, and then it's based on a model, and it kind of basically have like a network of it looks into a network of data, and it when you type in anything into the chat, right, and then it comes up with information or anything that could answer your question. So I to be honest, I've been using it every other day. So and it's so far I think it's dramatically increased my productivity. How about you, Ross?
Oh, I'm glad you brought up AI because AI is, I think, really going to be the next paradigm shift for all of us, whether we like it or not. Surprisingly, Aaron, I don't actually use AI from day to day. I have played around with ChatGPT. It initially impressed me, but after a few rounds with it, I found it a little bit boring because it wasn't as creative as I expected. When I talk to another human being, like another person, they bring with them the entire wealth of experience and nuance and individualism that makes it a far more interesting conversation to have. But when you talk to ChatGPT or you ask ChatGPT questions, everything it follows a very rigid structure. And after a while, I'm like, actually, I don't really need this. This is not what I want. This is not an entertaining conversation for me. Maybe that's just for me, right? I didn't have anything specific or any use cases that I needed to use ChatGPT for. So I'm on the other side of the fence where I think it's impressive, but I don't really use it that much.
I guess how do we even like understand that aspect of like we want more humanistic kind of answers, right? So I guess chat gpt is a very efficient way of just getting quick answers. Do you
Yeah,
think that? Yeah.
yeah. I think it's almost like I have a personal secretary. So like if I need a list of icebreakers, and then ChatGPT is going to give me a list of icebreakers. But ChatGPT can't give me the wealth of experience like, oh, I've tested out this one and this works really well, or this one didn't work so well. It'll just give me a list of icebreakers that it's learned from its, large language model. Whereas, for example, if I'm in a room with other people and ask them, hey, what icebreakers have you done that worked really well with people? And they're going to give me a very specific example for a very specific audience that has worked well with experience. And I think that's something that I really like doing. I like talking to people and getting their knowledge in my life. ChatGPT is good at summarizing. It's good at helping you perhaps understand a complicated thing a little bit simpler. So it does those things well. But it still feels very artificial. I don't know. Maybe in the future, the language models will feel more human-like, and that might change my mind. But right now, it still feels very artificial. I know that I'm talking to an artificial intelligence, and so yeah, it's interesting, and I think it is going to change the world, and it is already changing the world in many ways. But I can share a fun story. So I was actually at a church camp recently, a young adults church camp, and I was going to use ChatGPT for something really funny. During church camps, we're all in these groups, and then the camp games commander said, "Hey, everybody, come up with a fun group name," right? And so our group, we had to use the word feet, F-E-E-T. So there's other groups with like nose and hands and all that, so like all the body parts of the kingdom of God. And so my group was with the group feet, and I typed into ChatGPT. I asked my group members like, "Hey, shall we use ChatGPT to come up with a really fun name?" And I typed a prompt like saying like, "Oh, ChatGPT, please come up with a fun group name for games," and it has to include the word feet in it somehow, right? And it came out with the most boring names like, oh, the divine feet, or the futuristic feet, the amazing feet, and stuff like that. It was so boring. And then within the group, someone came up with a pun, a really clever pun, which was undefeatable. And I was like, wow, that's so amazing. Exactly. And in that moment, I was like, okay, ChatGPT, you have failed me. And then we immediately went with the human response, right? Same prompt, completely different set of responses. And so that really, just as you were mentioning this, right, that example came first to my mind to show the difference between ChatGPT versus a human. Yeah, that's been my interaction with ChatGPT so far.
Wow. I mean, I didn't know that you could even use it in a church camp setting.
Yeah, of all places,
I guess like,
right?
yeah. like church people would just think like, oh, it's so unholy to use a technology to help us, like, why can't we use our own? I do have my own fair share. Sorry.
I was going to say, are people going to say like, use our own God-given brain, don't use an artificial one, right? Something along those lines. But thankfully, no, I think everybody had a good laugh, and it does make things useful.
Yeah, I do have a fair share of stories. Like I can share one example where how this new technology, this ChatGPT has influenced me. So like a couple of weeks ago, right, I was hanging out with a group of friends. They're also Christians. So there's a very funny thing that we did was like there was someone's birthday, and we suddenly had a competition to actually like come up with a fitness plan and also a diet plan for this friend, because I think she wants to get in shape. And then we were like, okay, let's try to understand her by asking all the questions like, hey, so how when do you sleep and stuff like that. So and then we came to the part that we came up with all the details, but we forgot to find out the fitness plan, and we had to come up with a name of it. Then kind of like I at spur of the moment, I was like, okay, why not just use ChatGPT to generate a name? And then it was like I basically type in like, okay, give me a Christian like fitness plan that also has that features a Bible character, that is a strong women Bible character. So and then it came up like some really weird name. I can't remember the actual name, but it was like, okay, it's also not bad. It's not bad, but it's still I think it's we humans, I think, are still far more creative than we can ever imagine at this point in time. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, I don't think ChatGPT was made to be creative. I think from what I've read online, it's sort of like takes information that it knows and structures them in an easy to understand, or a way that makes it easier for us to read, and it just compiles information much easier. So that's why I think of it like a personal secretary, but not necessarily. I don't look at it like a filmmaker. I don't look at it as a creative writer. I don't look at it as a poet, right? Those things I think are still uniquely human. ChatGPT still follows very rigid language rules, and I don't think it has the creativity to break those rules, which is what humans do all the time, right? some of the most amazing minds are the ones who break the rules. They go outside the norm. They change the structure of the things around us, and that's why they're popular or they're interesting. But ChatGPT doesn't do that. It still follows very rigid English and language rules. And just talking about this, it reminds me of something I read on Facebook. So I'm an educator, as you mentioned earlier as well. We both studied psychology together. I love teaching psychology. And so I'm actually part of this group on Facebook of psychology lecturers who support each other and ask a lot of questions. And many lecturers are now posting about asking for help with students who use ChatGPT to do their assignments.
Wow.
And maybe you can weigh in on this as well from a perspective of someone who's done education and you use technology really frequently. And it's a tough question, right? Because many of these teachers, they read these students' essays and they know instantly from instinct and experience that this student has used ChatGPT and they've tried to pass it off as their own essay. And in my opinion, that should be considered as perhaps not plagiarizing because they're not really copying something, but it should be classified as something that is an unfair practice, right? Because technically you're not doing the work yourself. I don't know. What do you think about this?
No, I've also read articles like there's a University of Pennsylvania professor has also outwardly spoken that his entire class, I can't remember his name, but you can also check out Harvard Business School Harvard Idea class, and I can't remember his actual name, but he also talks about how ChatGPT has evolved it, and he actually created rules on how to use ChatGPT in his class. So one thing he does, so he kind of created use prompts in this way, and I probably could share the link later on. And actually, right, just a side note a bit that this episode itself, right, the whole structure of it is actually created, like we actually used ChatGPT to
create it,
to come up with the questions so that we can actually have a better structure in this podcast. So for those folks that are listening, you are actually listening to a fully structured podcast that is done by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So coming back to that question that you've asked, right? I would say it's a form of plagiarism, or maybe it's just outright plagiarism, because if for example that student, right, that's studying like psychology, right, probably have to come up with a topic, like a thesis, right? You write a thesis statement, but you probably ask a question like, hey, I have this statement and I think I have this thesis statement that I want to write. Can you help me write this in 1,200 words or something? And then when ChatGPT generates all the answers, and if he does copy from that, I think it's blatantly plagiarism. But if he kind of like use it like in a way to structure his essay or his thesis, I guess it's not exactly plagiarism. It's more of like ideating, or more like it kind of like reduces the writer's block. There's this phenomenon where sometimes writers have too many ideas in their mind, but they don't know where to start. So you probably need something like a prompt, right? Like ChatGPT is very good at doing that. So I think I've also come across a few articles that it helps like writer's block, this ChatGPT.
Yeah, so I think what you're describing is using ChatGPT as a tool to help you do something better. And I think I'm totally fine with that. But we need some form of regulation. And I think even Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, also has mentioned this similar view in front of Congress and stuff like that, that without regulation, without some kind of guidelines, terrible things could happen, right, in the future if this really goes wild. And humanity is equally as capable of amazing things and also terrible things. So it is a bit scary, and we have to be careful. When it comes to education, I think it is really tough, right? Because how do you stop a student from just using ChatGPT to write their assignments? That's a tough question, even for me as an educator. The only solution I can think of is something that a friend of mine mentioned many years ago. She was studying medicine in Russia, and she told me that in Russia they do exams a little bit differently. The final exam was actually a verbal oral examination with just the student and the lecturer in the lecturer's office one-on-one. And so the lecturer would verbally ask you questions, right? A list of questions, and you would have to verbally answer those questions. And so you can't cheat, right? You can't use ChatGPT. You genuinely have to bring it out from your knowledge. And that was very interesting because that's the first time in my life I've ever heard of a fully oral done examination. That was one. The second one is, of course, no examination is perfect. Apparently in Russia, if you bring in a bottle of vodka, you can bribe your lecturers. Or so I've heard. So that's the funny part. I don't think there's an easy solution forward for education, but I think all educational institutions should quickly implement guidelines that say that, how students should and should not use ChatGPT when it comes to doing work. You're right. It sometimes is very useful to give you a prompt to help you get started, right, to overcome that block. But if you're just going to copy and paste word for word, then you are becoming intellectually lazy and you are just outsourcing your work to a machine. And I think that's not the right way we should go forward about it. Yeah.
I think I do agree with you in that sense. Like, if we tend to rely so much on it, right, then it becomes like a scaffold, right? It becomes, it will take away some of the cognitive skills that we have, right, as essentially as humans, right? So I think let's bring on to the next question, because like we know that technology, it comes and goes, it comes in spades or so, and sometimes it trends, it becomes a trend, and then sometimes it dies down. So this trend probably will stay for another maybe couple months or even years to come. But I think more importantly is that what are some we talk about the benefits, right? What maybe we can think of another some other benefits, but I mean, what are some potential benefits and risks associated with the increasing adoption of ChatGPT or just AI in general in various aspects of life? I mean,
I can definitely talk about this because recent examples have just been flying around social media and I've been watching them and reading them. I'm going to talk about the drawbacks. I think that's more scary, even for me, right? One of my friends, he works in the film industry, and he was sharing a WhatsApp conversation. Now, this is a true story. He shared this conversation he had with other, I think they were like editors or something in another company overseas. If I'm not mistaken, it was a company in China. And that company had fired some of the staff who were friends with my particular friend, right? And they were sharing on WhatsApp that they were fired not because they were not performing, not because they couldn't get the job done, but because one of the AI tools that had recently come out was basically making their job obsolete. Like the person in charge of the company no longer needed these staff members, because why pay them so much when I can just pay a subscription fee to this AI software and it can do the editing just as well, if not better, than a human being. And that was quite shocking because they shared it on WhatsApp and they were sharing how they are now looking for jobs and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, wow, that is really scary. And I think that's something we haven't fully grasped yet. That, I think in the past, technological revolutions don't happen as quickly as ChatGPT. A good example of this is the fact that ChatGPT reached, I think, 1 million users. Was it within like a few days or something?
Yes.
It was a really short period of time, right? Yeah, 1 million users. And that's how they measured how the network effect. And I think, in the past technological revolution, things like starting fire, the invention of the light bulb, and, the industrial revolution, those took years, if not decades, before everything came into play. Whereas AI and ChatGPT and all the other tools that are sprouting out every day, there's a new AI tool. These are happening within hours, if not minutes. And it makes me scared because part of my job right now, I'm working in the customer service field. And ChatGPT is something that could potentially replace, especially the lower level customer service staff who handle like basic inquiries, general inquiries. A lot of companies are using bots and stuff like that. They're not very good yet, but technology grows exponentially. They could be twice as good tomorrow, 10 times as good next week. And so that does scare me a little bit, and I don't have a solution to that problem, right? Or at least if I had to think of one, we have to think of concrete jobs that AI can't replace. Things like being a plumber or electrician, physical manual labor might just come back in fashion. Suddenly everybody, might be training and upskilling themselves to be a technician, because that's not something that can be easily replaced. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Eventually, like even robots will even replace those manual labor. manual intensive labor
Well,
jobs also, right? We don't know like
true.
20 years, 20, 30 years from now, and maybe most of us will become AI experts. Like maybe 20, 30 years from now, like we just learn how to program AI as though as like changing the car wiper, or even like setting up like uh I don't know, could be just fine tuning things, like basically whatever we are fine tuning now in our daily lives, like changing the settings of our apps, right? Maybe we might even do
Yep.
that in our AI in the future, like in on a day, hourly basis, or minute basis, right? We don't know
Yep.
for sure, but we could come to that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in many ways you're right. I can give you a funny example that happened recently as well. So my mother, she recently started using ChatGPT for her Bible study of all things, which is really funny because my mom is not that technically savvy. Like she can use WhatsApp and basic stuff like that. But sometimes when it comes to emails and PDFs and attachments, she needs my help, or PowerPoint slides. And so her friends were saying, hey, when you want to do your Bible study, why don't you use ChatGPT? It helps you. It's really useful and all that. And she was asking me how to get started. And I showed it to her. And I just said, talk to it like you're talking to a friend and asking a question. And she started using it. And it really helped her. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. Previously, technology would have had a lot of a higher learning curve. But like you said, one day it might become so easily available or so easily integratable that you don't even know that you're using AI, because it becomes just synonymous with your world, right? We don't think about the technology that goes behind the encryption when we send a WhatsApp message, right? There's a
Yeah.
technical and complicated encryption behind it. We don't think about it. It's just there.
Yeah.
And I think you're right to say that one day AI is going to be just like that. Ubiquitous, I think, is the word, where it's just going to be part of our daily lives. We won't even know we're using AI. It's just going to be so natural.
Yeah, I guess. I think you also brought up a very that situation, right? That the entire company was fired, right? So I guess
Yeah.
to certain extent, you, the A, what AI can do right now is like to automate very low level tasks. So I'm not sure how what kind of service or product that company offers, but perhaps that AI is so capable enough to just take hold the entire company, right? But I don't think
Mm.
AI today, right, it has reached like general intelligence. So what general intelligence means is like it can easily function as a normal human being. I describe it as that way. So
Mm.
they would have like very quick way to adapt to different situations or contexts, and then provide like new information on the spot, which I don't think AI
Yep.
can do that now. They can generate information that is been studied and been crawled to, like
Yep.
crawling, basically the technical term for what basically the language model actually goes through all the data. So they
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's too far away from, yeah. And I think just to wrap things up for this episode, I guess what can we learn like right now, as even as like for someone who just starting to learn how to use AI, or just like maybe like, oh, I'm not so good in technology, like where do I start? And will it's gonna scare me, right? Because like picking up new things it's very challenging, it can be very uncomfortable, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think innovation happens whether we like it or not. And the only way to overcome this kind of fear is to be a part of that movement, to learn, right? First and foremost. When people used to drive, not drive, but people used to ride horses, right? And then the car came and people thought, oh, the car will never replace horses. And then after a few decades, everybody's got a car. And then same with phones, right? People thought, oh, the telegram is like instant. I don't need a phone, and now phones are everywhere. And technology progresses whether you like it or not. I've got to admit, I'm personally actually quite scared, because I see more of the scary things about AI, and I see how I've seen real life scenarios where it's replacing jobs, where it is making work easier for some people and also harder for others. So it is a little bit of a scary future, because there's so much uncertainty with the new technology. And I'm often reminded about a quote from a very famous movie, Jurassic Park, and the book as well, where Dr. Ian Malcolm, one of the characters, he said something in the book where they're discussing this whole ethical issue of whether or not the scientists should bring back dinosaurs from the dead back to life, right? Something like that. And he said, like, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could that they never stopped to think if they should. And I think that's a very powerful statement, because it's true for all technological advances. Scientists are always excited, people are always excited. Let's push it further, let's do more, let's create greater products. And we don't often think about the regulations and the problems that can come from these products until it's too late. And so I think we're at that sort of like the edge of AI where it's just exploding. And I think if we don't take measures soon, we're going to be caught up in the explosion. So I'm personally a little bit worried, but also hopeful for the future. I think the ideal future that I see is that AI is integrated with society in a way that it helps all of us do better, become better. The people I talked about who lost their jobs, can AI then help them get a new job, right? So that's the second bit that's not quite there yet. Yes, AI can replace you. Can AI also then make your life fulfilling even after you've been replaced? And so I think we haven't reached that level yet, but maybe we might in the future. And hopefully if scientists can just crack the nuclear fission problem and we have free energy for everybody around the world, then I think we don't have to worry. But until energy crisis is solved, we're still going to have to work hard for our money. So, yeah.
I mean, I guess, that's a great point that you mentioned that, I mean, we should continue to feel a bit cautious about new technology. And I guess we don't really have to fear per se, but as long as we are constantly updated and also be in touch with the new technologies, but not we don't have to necessarily fear them. So like, I guess like for those who are not using ChatGPT or any sort of AI at the moment, I guess it's okay to try and fail when it comes to new technology. Like, what can you lose, right? Like, I mean, the worst thing can happen with ChatGPT is just taking your data in. The worst thing they'll just take your data, and what they can really do with your data. I mean, obviously don't key in like personally identifiable information. I think that's the most basic thing you can do when it comes to
That's a very good reminder as well for people who are listening and don't realize ChatGPT is not confidential. It's very clearly stated on their policy that whatever data you provide it, it's going to use to learn. So please don't put any personal identifiable data. Please don't put your PIN numbers and your bank accounts. Please don't do that. Yeah.
Great. So I thank you, Ross, for joining me this episode, and I really enjoyed this. And I guess if we could do some more episodes in the future, perhaps we might be a regular in this podcast. And thanks for joining, and happy to do it more often.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I definitely would love to be featured again once I have played around with ChatGPT a little bit more and seen hopefully how useful it helps me make my life,
Yeah, I guess we can talk about other things too, other than ChatGPT. So thanks for all for tuning in, and have a great weekend or weekday whenever you're listening to.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.